everybody. Welcome to a Monday morning here on Coffee Hour, getting your week started. Thanks for joining me, taking the time out of your day. Okay. I'm sure you wore yourself out over the weekend and you're ready to get back to the relaxing work of doing the electrical work, which is, again, what we do best. So welcome to the show. I hope everybody did have a wonderful weekend and got all recharged for the week. Get out there, make that money, whether you're preparing for an electrical exam, whether or not you're just getting out there as a leader of your company or the leader of your group, or maybe you're not the leader in your company, but at the end of this week, you are going to be the leader of your company. Okay, you're going to be that go-to person that everybody goes to about their NEC knowledge and all that other good stuff that has to do with the National Electrical Code. I want to thank everybody. We are still waiting to send out the emails for the winners for quarter one. Jeff has got a couple more people that he's waiting, so he wants to send them all out at one time. There's a couple people who have not reached out yet, so he really doesn't want to piecemeal it because he's trying to keep it all together. Because once it starts, we gotta make all the stuff. So make sure you go check out our YouTube channel and watch the video entitled Winners, or go to our channel and type in Winners and it'll come up. And if your name is there, make sure you follow the instructions and get everything in. We want to make sure we get everybody in before we start sending this out. Otherwise, I've told him if they're not in here by Wednesday to go on and just start sending the emails and just get it done. I don't want to wait anymore on that because we're already into the second quarter, that type of thing. So look for that to take place, and make sure you check your junk mail. And again, you won't see the emails until after, probably Wednesday this week, unless the people we're waiting on actually send in their information and we can get that completed. Okay, there's a couple people. So let's do some quick shout outs to everybody in the room. Let everybody know who all's here and what's going on. Hopefully everything sounds okay. The audio's okay. Had a little bit of a crazy thing this morning. I didn't think the audio was working and couldn't hear me and everything. So hopefully you can hear me okay. Let's see here. We got Adams in the house. Adam's got his pint of coffee. I got a little bit of coffee left. Adam, this is my second cup. So I didn't make it to the third. Otherwise, I would have had to migrate over to the Diet Pepsi. I'm just saying. I cut myself off at 3 cups. Let's see. Good morning, Paul. Glad to have you here, my friend. Welcome. Tino's in the house. Tino, glad to have you here. Look, I'm in the house right here from Facebook. There you go. Master the NEC. That's my username on all of my social platforms, by the way. Master the NEC. So make sure you check out all of our platforms. Let's see here. Dan says good morning. Glad to have you here, Dan. Joseph here this morning on Atlantic City, New Jersey. Hey, there you go. A lot of burnt trees from a fire on the way down. Uh-oh. That's not good. It isn't from me. I'm burning stuff out in burn barrels, but it isn't from me, bro. Okay? We don't burn here till after 4 p.m. Then we're allowed to burn. And I am burning off a lot of crap, okay? Because I got a lot of brush I got to burn. And I don't want to take it to the landfill. So let's see here. Good morning. Glad to have you here. Kendra's in the house. Good morning. Let's make that money. That's what I'm talking about. Get out there. Let's do it. Marlon's in the house. Marlon down in Tampa, Florida. What's the weather like down in Tampa today? Rob, welcome, Rob. Rob's watching over on the old Fast Tracks 2, Northern Iowa. Rob, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here. Jonathan's in the house. Jonathan, good morning to you. And he's watching over on the Facebook. Thank you. Manny's in the house. Definitely over on Facebook. Manny, check out that dog. It looks like a little Boston. Or maybe it's what is that? French Bulldog? Good morning, Felix. Welcome. Awesome logo you got there, Felix. We got a CMECP in the house. Good morning, Jason. Watching over on the tube. Thank you, Jason. Glad to have you here. There you go. Jonathan is shouting out to the people. Frank, welcome. Another great week getting in. Glad to have you here, Frank. Rob, good morning. Hashtag win, getting in on the spin. Absolutely. Terrence, good morning. Over from up here in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, contractor up in a little north of me. Glad to have you here. Christopher from UNC down in North Carolina. Glad to have you here. John Starlace. No relation to Linda Lovelace. I'm just saying. Just saying. Got to get that out of the way, John. We don't want anybody to think, that's something to do with that. What's up, Rob? Again, I sound good? Thank you. Awesome. All right. Just wanted to make sure. What's up, Edgar? Glad to have you here joining us. Erie, definitely working out of the Fast Tracks program. Glad to have you here, Erie. Great to have you here. Michael's in the house. Michael Yarborough in the house. Glad to have you here. Crypto's in the house. Glad to have you here, Crypto. David's in the house. Glad to have you here, David. Brandon's in the house. Good morning from Houston, Texas. Brandon, did you see my response over on the mobile app there for your motors question? Just it's all about the length, my friend. That's what I'm supposed to. So that's what she said. All right, let's see here. Let's see. Red Dog's in the house. Red Dog, Fast Track, Los Angeles. There you go. Let's get it. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Tara, good morning from North Alabama's in the house. Thank you, Tara. Glad to have you here. Ariel, good morning. Philly. I was a couple years ago. I keep saying I was just in Philly, but it wasn't just in Philly. We had the Nika. Oh, by the way, we get to shout out. Let me know who you are, where you're from, what you got going on. That's what everybody's doing in the comments. Glad to have you here. If this is your first time, this show is not specifically for exam prep people. It's not necessarily for anybody. It's all electrical. So the topic can go anywhere. Today we're going to be finishing up talking about equipment grounding conductors. Kind of just finish up. We're going to be talking about identifying equipment grounding conductors today in a little bit. So if you got any questions, feel free to chime in. I'll be more than happy to try to answer those if it's germane to the topic. Otherwise, do me a favor, go to paulabernathy.com and post your questions there, and they will be answered on upcoming podcasts and whatnot. And that's generally how we get information in so we can create shows and podcasts and things like that. But what I was going to tell you is that I am going to be at NECA, again, knock on wood, this year. Looks like I'm going to be at NECA, and it's in Chicago. So if you're in Chi-Town, come by the show. NECA, it's a great place to go to see. And don't ask me when it is. They just let me know that I'm going to be there. So probably September or something like that. I don't know. You can Google it, NECA convention. Anyway, it's a great time to see the manufacturers, to meet some of your social media people that you follow maybe. Also to see what new products are out there, get your hands on them. Free goodies, free samples, all that kind of good stuff. And, there's also, you see a tool you like, you never know, you could make a deal or something there. Okay, you're in there. So, but it's a great networking opportunity for you to get there and see people and meet manufacturers and things like that. What's up, David? Thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here. And new places in the house. Glad to have you here. New place. What's wrong with your old place? I'm just saying. Okay. The tube stream's great. Awesome. Watching over on Fast Tracks Tube. I also remind you, it is so easy to do it from the phone. If you have not gotten our mobile app yet, dude, I don't know what is wrong with you if you haven't. If you haven't got this mobile app yet, you crazy. You cray is because it's just simple as tapping on the mobile app. Oops, there you go. Tapping up here on Coffee Hour, and boom, it's right there. Okay. And you can just do full screen and turn it. Boom, right there. Look at that. Can't be any easier than that. You can watch it on the job site. You even have the ability, if you tap on it, you can minimize it if you want. That takes you down to the minimize it. And then you can hit the chat button over here, and you can actually chat if you want. There you go. You can't see it. The white doesn't show up real well. Hold on, let me change that. Did you know you have the ability to change the color too on these things? So you can change it over to black if you want. But anyway, there you go. So anyway, Fast Tracks Tube. You need to get it. A lot of changes coming there. Let's see here. We got, good morning, Alex. Thanks for joining us this morning. We got High Voltage Hands in the house. Thank you for joining us. Glad to have you here. All right. Well, again, keep it going. Let me know who you are, where you're from, what you got going on. If you're going to go to NECA, or you're a fast track student, or you're in our program, you got questions, just feel free to go on and let us know. Yep. So that's right. So you got to go look at that code reference I gave you, because in the question it said it was an 18-inch. So again, or you might still have the ambient you got to deal with. It explicitly tells you that you don't have to deal with it when it is less than 24 inches for the number of current carrying conductors in there, type of thing. Okay. And the reason for that is it allows heat dissipation on each side. So anyway, but that's important for you to read those rules and understand that there's more to 310.15C1. There's other things that are in there, that thing that you got to be aware of. What's up, Nepo? Welcome. Glad to have you here as well. All right. Okay. All right, let's go on and get into today's little lesson. We're going to be just kind of tackling identifying wire type equipment grounds and see where we go from there. Kind of, wind out this thing. If you have any questions germane to what we're talking about or anything, maybe we talked about last week, because there's a part 1, part 2, part 3 to this, and we talked about cable trays. We talked about MC cable, AC cable. We talked about when you can use the armor, when you can't. Talked about all those things. So now we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the identification of the wire when it comes to equipment grounding conductors. Okay, a very important conductor serves two main functions. One, facilitate the operation of an overcurrent protected device, right? That's the equipment ground. It helps clear the breaker on a ground fault, right? And then it also establishes a reference to earth. It ties everything together. So it serves a bonding function. Now, in the definition of equipment grounding conductor, it also has an informational note that reminds you that it does serve multiple functions. So there's a faction, I should say, of people out there that would like to see the equipment grounding conductor changed to equipment bonding conductor. But it's unnecessary, right? Because it does serve a grounding role, but it also serves a bonding role. And so it makes it clear. And I know there's a lot of people that would like the NEC to be written in a way that it's just like an installation guide. And that again tells you at the very beginning of the scope of the NEC in Article 90 that that's not what this is. Okay, it's a guide that helps the trained professional, not the untrained. And I'll tell you right now, I get tons of calls from people as a director of technical services for Encore Wire. I get tons of people that'll call me and literally want me to walk them through how to install the products. And I have to really stop, because I got to say, look, are you an electrician? And they go, no. I mean, I know homeowners can do their own work, but we have to be very careful in the advice that we give, because they don't understand the terminologies. They don't understand the requirements. They don't understand the minimum standards that you have to meet. And so if they do something you tell them and they get it wrong, then they could get hurt. And we don't want that to happen. So again, call the professionals. That's what we do. All right, so let's get into today and talk a little bit about. And John, hey, John was the winner of the software. I shared your information with the software provider. Hopefully, y'all are in communication. If not, give him time. He'll get that communication. But I'll keep monitoring that. Okay. The earth is not an effective ground fault current path. Absolutely, it's not. But you still got to connect to it because it stabilizes voltage. Right? You have to have that reference point, that 0 point, okay? So you have that connection through the system. That's why we connect to earth on a grounded system. That's that function. So it is to clear an overcurrent device to give a low impedance effective ground fault current path back to the source. But it's also there to help with bonding, which is tying all metal parts together. That's why we're required in the code to have an equipment grounding conductor. That's why we're required to bond the metal boxes. That's why we're required to bond the raceways. And we can utilize an equipment grounding conductor or equipment bonding jumper, which ultimately comes together to the equipment grounding conductor in those systems to achieve this. So that's what that conductor is there for. It's a safety conductor. Now, an equipment grounding conductor is not part of a circuit conductor, right? Where you have the blacks and the whites and the reds. It's not a circuit conductor. So when you see the code talk about circuit conductors, it's not talking about the equipment ground. Although the code requires that all conductors, 300.3, I believe, require all of the conductors to run together, okay? And so, by keeping everything in close proximity, it removes the additional increased impedance that can come from reactants, capacitance, and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, it's all how we route them, and that's why we put an equipment grounded conductor with the circuit conductors. Okay, that type of thing. Charlie, can multi GECs be installed to one ground rod? Sure. You have to have separate clamps if you want, but electrode is electrode, right? So it doesn't matter how you're feeding into it, that type of thing. Okay, so I could have 2 panels, okay, and I have one grounding electrode system, let's say ground rods. So first one doesn't meet 25 ohms or less, so I install a second one if that's my option, and I install it 6 feet away. I drive it 8 feet into the ground, right? And if I want to go to those ground rods with multiple panels, who cares? Lightning doesn't care. It's just trying to get to that earth, right? For lightning transient surges. So it doesn't matter, that type of thing. So anyway, hopefully that answers that question. All right, so let's look at 250.119. Okay, we understand a little bit about, we can look at 250.118 and see all the different types of equipment grounded conductors. But we're going to talk about the wire type today. Okay, so we've learned earlier that unless required elsewhere in the code, equipment grounded conductors are permitted to be bare, covered, or insulated. So that's the general rule. Although you saw a couple days ago when I talked about the fact that you got, for example, healthcare facility that has a patient care area or space, depending on which code cycle you're in, that they're going to require that it be an insulated equipment grounded conductor. So that's an example when you see something in code that says unless required elsewhere. That's what they mean. Another example of that would be a swimming pool application where they require an insulated equipment ground. Well, that would be an example of elsewhere in the NEC. So you've got your general rules in 250.119, and then you have the statement of, well, unless required elsewhere. So the NEC has rules in the NEC that says, look, you meet the requirements of chapter 1 through 4, and obviously Article 250 is in chapter 2, but it says you meet those rules generally throughout the NEC, unless they're modified or supplemented somewhere else in the NEC in chapters 1 through 7. So you could have chapter 6, which is pools, is going to modify or supplement something under the general requirement in chapter 2. So that's kind of how that works. So when you see something in a code that does say unless required elsewhere, then you follow the general rule. But there is, again, somewhere else in the NEC that may increase it and say, nah, wait a minute, I need you to do this or this, and that wouldn't be the normal, but we need you to do it a little different. Then that's what you do. You follow the code that way. Okay? Now, individually covered or insulated equipment grounded conductors of the wire type, right, are required to have a continuous outer finish that is either green or green with one or more yellow stripes, except as permitted in this section. So again, we're permitted to be bare, but when we do insulate it, okay, so if I have an individually covered or individually insulated equipment ground, then it's going to be green, or it's going to be green. If I have a green, then I'm going to have, if I have another one, let's say for isolated ground, then we would have a green with a yellow stripe, that type of scenario to signify there's a difference, that type of thing. But that's important. Now, could you have a bare in a lot of products? Absolutely, you could. Just remember, when it is insulated, okay, or the equipment ground is covered, other than, for example, where it's permitted in a cable assembly, like an SER or something like that, which is going to restrict its use to above ground only, right? And so those type of applications. But other than that, it's important to remember that if you see an equipment ground, that if it's insulated, because remember, it's allowed to be bare, but if it's insulated for whatever application or whether the code tells you to insulate it, then it would be green or green with yellow stripes, depending on the application, okay? Tino has a question. That's obviously not about equipment grounds, but we'll read it anyway. Tina says, so you say rods 8 feet. Is there any method that you can put in the ground that does, or does it have to be straight down You're a little off topic. The code says that you drive it 8 feet. If you drive it and you hit rock bottom, then it allows you to install it at an angle up to 45 degrees. If you still hit rock bottom, okay, then the code's going to allow you to put it horizontally, but you'll have to bury it, okay? And to show you where that is in the code, I will just take you to the code just to show you that, since you asked the question and we're already here. So I'll just go show you. And we're talking about the installation. Let's see here. Let's get into right here. Okay, grounding electrode installation. So let's see here. Let's get down to, let's see here. Let's see here. Oops, I didn't go that right. I went too far. Sorry. All right, so here we go. So we're down here. So here's your answer, your question right here. If you're using a rod, pipe, or plate, by the way. Okay. All right. So here's all the requirements for it. Yeah, here's your having to supplement it. Yada, yada, yada. Here's your instructions. So the electrode shall be driven at least 8 feet in length in contact with the soil. It shall be driven to a depth not less than 8 feet, except that where rock bottom is encountered, means you can't drive it any further. You hit rock. Then it says the electrode shall be driven at an oblique angle not to exceed 45 degrees from the vertical. Okay, so you can't get all crazy now. You can turn it up to a 45-degree angle, okay, and drive it. If you still encounter rock bottom, that's a big old rock you're hitting down there, like a boulder or whatnot. It says then it allows the electrode shall be permitted to be buried in a trench that is at least 30 inches deep. Okay. And in a case, this is a part that everybody misses. The upper end of the electrode shall be flush with, not protruding beyond, flush with, or below grade level, unless the above grade end of the grounding electroconductor attachments are protected against physical damage. Of course, you still got to have 8 feet in contact with the earth, so any part of it sticking above the ground would technically be a violation of this part of the rule. But let's say you're using a 10-foot ground rod and you got 2 feet sticking up. Well, that's okay if you got 8 feet driven into the earth, but you're going to have to protect the portion that's sticking out of the earth. That becomes more trouble than it's freaking worth, right? So there's your picture right there. So there's your code requires this first. You can't go to this. This is where people get confused. You can't go to this unless you hit rock bottom. You go to this and you hit rock bottom, then you're allowed to go to this in that order. You can't just jump to this right away, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, it's not a lesson about GECs and GEs and all that stuff, but figured it was easy enough while we're there. You know, you're fine, but people do have those questions, so we want to make sure we cover it. Okay, all right, back to equipment grounding conductors. Good morning, Greg. Glad to have you here. Good morning, Robert. I saw you in there. Good morning, Peter. Carlos, I see you sneaking in. Glad to have you here. Skyattle? Is that what it is? I see you in here with the hashtag win. All right, so there we go. Next it says conductors with insulation or individual covering that is green with one or more yellow stripes or otherwise identified as permitted by this section are not permitted to be used for underground or grounded circuit conductors, or for ungrounded, ungrounded, that's hot, or grounded neutral conductors. Grounded is to say not all grounded conductors are neutral, but all neutral conductors are grounded, okay? All right, so what that also means right here is that there is an allowance in the code for you to re-identify a conductor as an equipment ground, the same way that we could re-identify a conductor as a neutral conductor under specific size requirements, okay? So there is allowances for that, you to be able to do that. Okay, it's very common for somebody to keep in their truck black wire of certain sizes. That's just, pretty much general for what they do. And they're like, well, I don't want to have a green 2 gauge. Then, okay, well, the code's going to give you some leeway on that. Okay, so again, there's some allowances here. So let's go. All right, next. So what exceptions to this? So identification, again, this is all this requirement to be green. There are some exceptions to that rule. Exception 1 says power limited class 2 or class 3 cables, power limited fire alarm cables, and communication cables containing only circuits rated at less than 50 volts AC or 60 volts DC if connected to equipment not required to be actually grounded, right? Then it shall be permitted to use a color with green insulation or green with one or more yellow stripes for other than equipment grounding purposes. But you got to meet these caveats, okay? So again, this may be in a pre-assembled cable assembly. Most of the time, they're not going to provide that green in there for that. The manufacturers who make the power limited class 2, class 3, or power limited fire alarm are typically not, if it works at those voltage classes, are not going to put a green in there. I mean, they're just not. That doesn't mean that you couldn't have some imported product come in that might have something, but be careful of the voltage that you're working with in the system. So again, less than 50 volts AC or 60 volt DC, and it's connected to specific equipment, let's say, that's not required to be grounded, okay? If that's the case, then the green or green with yellow may not be equipment ground. So just be careful of that, all right? Next, flexibility. It says flexible cords having integral insulation and jacket without an equipment grounding conductor shall be permitted to have the continuous outer finish that is green. Okay, so you have some allowances for a flexible cable, and there's also applications where this is actually it's a double insulated type of cord, and the outer finish of the cord itself is green. Okay, and it doesn't have a equipment ground inside of it. It might be a double insulated, that type of thing. Integral to the insulation type of scenario. So, all right. So here we go. Identification of the wire type. So here you see here, insulated conductors in green or green with one or more yellow stripes in here. I'm just assuming this piece of equipment has a bunch of isolated grounds as well or something like that. I don't know the equipment. But this is kind of just showing you. One of the questions I do get from people right here that look at images like this, and they see this bend right here, and they go, isn't that exceeding the maintained minimum bending radius of a single insulated conductor? And the reality of that is, no, it's not, because the code only worries about that when it's over 1,000 volts. When it's under 1,000 volts, I get a lot of questions from people that say, what is the maintained minimum bending radius on a single insulated conductor? And the reality is that's not in the NEC. Now, you can reach out to the manufacturer and see how tight, but we give you some guidelines as a manufacturer. We'll say, look, we'll let you do this because it probably is not going to damage the conductor, because the moment you damage it, whether it cracks on the backside because you stressed it too far, or it crinkles up on the inside and causes the insulation to split, then you know you've gone too far. But the manufacturers typically won't give you much guidance on that unless it's over 1,000 volt application. Anything under that, and the reason for that is you're pushing these insulated conductors in boxes all day long, even switch boxes and device boxes, and you're just cramming them back in there, and it doesn't damage the insulation. So we understand that. It's really only becomes an issue when the conductors get larger. And we will give you, for example, at Encore Wire, we have an installation guide that's available on our tools and resources page. And I wrote this document, and it gives you some guidelines. It's not a manufacturer's instructions. It's not something that's part of our listing. It's not like, ooh, if I don't follow what Paul says on this document, I'm violating the manufacturer's listing. No, that is not true. But we do give it as an extra kind of some guidance, that type of stuff. That's all it's provided for. Okay? Anyway, this is just showing you some green and yellow. All right, section number 3. It says conductors with green insulation. And then these are exceptions, by the way, for the green or the green with yellow on all equipment grounds, okay, that are insulated. This is the exceptions to that. It says conductors with green insulation shall be permitted to be used as ungrounded signal conductors were installed between the output termination of a traffic signal control and traffic signal indicating head, okay, traffic lights, that type of thing. Signaling circuits installed in accordance with these exceptions shall include an equipment grounded conductor in accordance with 250.118, so that's our list, so we have to have an equipment grounded conductor by the list. And the wire type equipment grounding conductor shall be bare or have insulation that is covered that is green with one or more yellow stripes. So it can be bare or it has to be with green with one or more yellow stripes. It is common for ungrounded hot conductors that supply power to green traffic signal lights have green insulation. So this must be very common to that industry. I have never installed traffic lights. I've never done anything to do with traffic lights. I don't know if they're just using green because it's the power to the green light that's in the traffic light, and that's just easy for them to understand. But if that was the logic, then I guess they have a green, a red, and a yellow. I don't know. I have never wired up a traffic light, so I don't know. I'm just saying. All right. So here we go right here. Green insulation in low voltage circuits, the exception. So here's that green cord, right? Remember, that's exception number 2, right? That's where it doesn't have one. Notice the prong doesn't have one, but the cord is green. So typically double insulated here, probably, right? Here is exception number 1, right here. Small circuits. I guess this is their 50 volts, under 50 volts AC or 60 volt DC application. So in these kind of applications, wouldn't matter. And then of course, this is your exception. And again, this is for traffic lights. I don't know how many of you do a traffic light, but again, you got a little exception. I guess this got in there because the traffic light industry said, whoa, wait a minute, Home Slick. We'll provide a wiring method. We'll provide an equipment ground. We just want to use green for the green light, but we'll use green with yellow or bare to handle the grounding and all that kind of stuff. I guess that's their mentality, I guess. Now you know. Be a good trivia question. When can you use a green insulated conductor for something other than an equipment ground? So this might be trivia for somebody. Okay. Now, here's where we got most of you guys that are on the truck and you stock stuff like if you're doing the hot tubs or doing all this other stuff. So what about the identification when it comes to conductors that are 4 and larger, right? So in this case, 250.119b of the National Electrical Code. Oh, by the way, we are using the 2023. We always go to the latest edition for those that are asking. We're always in the latest edition. It may be slightly different or different code reference, but it's going to be close. For whatever cycle you're in, 2020 or 2017. Oh, and by the way, just a shout out to everybody. We are no longer supporting I shouldn't say supporting. We are not selling 2017 exam prep products anymore. It's time now. We're at that point where we do it each time a new code's about ready to come out. Right before the NITMAMs, what we do is we'll cut off, and we only like to stay to 2 code cycles. So we're in 2020 and 2023. Right? So once the 2026 comes out, we will keep the 2020, 2023, and 2026 until we get to the point where a certain number of states now, and I only think there's a couple that's left on 2017. I'm sorry. We still support those programs if you're in them now, so we're not cutting you off, but we are migrating away from the 2017 stuff, and we're only promoting or selling our 2020 and 2023. And of course, when the 2026 comes out, we will have all 3 until we get to this point for the 2029 type cycle. Does that make sense? Anyway, just wanted to keep you aware. We still support it if you bought it. But again, just a little different. All right. So 250.119b, requirements for conductors 4 and larger. It says equipment grounded conductors that are 4 gauge and larger are required to comply with the following. All right. Okay. Well, we know that they could be. Yep, John, and we still support our program, but we won't sell any new courses on the 2017. Sorry. So, but if you already have our program, we still support it. Nothing's changing for the support, except for most people that bought the Black and the Plus. It's only a year access, and then once that access is over, you can't extend it. So it's over, that type of thing. Let's see. All right, so 250.119b says that equipment grounded conductors 4 and larger are required to comply with the following. Number 1, at the time of installation, if the installation doesn't comply with 250.19a, means it's not green or green with the yellow stripe, it says it must be permanently identified. And again, this is not specific to any cables, any type of wiring method. This is in general, okay? So it can apply to cables. It can apply to conductors in a raceway, all that type of stuff, okay? It says it must be permanently identified as an equipment grounded conductor at each end and every point where the conductor is accessible. So all junction boxes. So if you have a panel to a box and you have a midway junction point in a box, you'd have to do it at the panel, you'd have to do it at the end box, and you have to also identify it at the junction box. And this is simply, people say, well, it's permanent. Tape is not permanent. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. If you wrap it at the point of termination, you don't have to wrap the entire conductor. It just says what? It says at the point where the conductor is accessible and where it's terminated, okay? So you just put one wrap around it of green tape and it's fine. Do we just assume that this green tape is going to magically on its own start to come off and then just jump off of the damn conductor? No, some people are reading permanent so literally. And it's, look, tape is acceptable, okay? You can color it, you can paint it, as long as the paint's not detrimental to the insulation, okay? More like a water-based paint or something like that, something that's not going to cause a reaction or something like that, that type of scenario, okay? Now, let's see here. Now, here's what it says, exception to this rule. Conductors 4 and larger are not required to be marked in conduit bodies that contain no splices or unused hubs. Okay, so if it passes through a conduit, if it passes through an LB, if it passes through a LR, LB, LL, whatnot, and there's no splices in there, then what's the point of marking it? It just passes right through, so then you wouldn't have to do that, okay? All right, so wire type. So here's example over here. So this right here, I don't know if you can see it. I can zoom in on this. See, it's black, and they re-identified it here with the green. And they didn't have to do all this, right? I mean, it looks good, right? But this is perfectly acceptable right here. Now, this part, wrapping it on the bare, is kind of pointless, right? Makes no sense to me, because bare, we know what bare is, but you know, hey, to each his own. I'm not going to be a hater. Haters ain't going to be hating, all right? But I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine. If you don't know that what a bare is, then, you know, is what it is, okay? So you're allowed to do it in 4 and larger, okay? Now, requirements. We have all these requirements, again, that we have to meet, we have to identify. Now, let's look at this here. It continues, number 2. That was just number 1. Number 2 says the identification is required to encircle. Okay? Now, the guys that do things in the code, you know, we see this all the time, even for identification of ungrounded hot conductors and re-identifying conductors in a cable assembly where you can reuse the white as a hot conductor only in cables. Not in raceways, but in cables. There is an allowance in 200.7 for you to do that. Now, a lot of people will take it and use a little Sharpie. Even in that requirement in 200.7 as well, you're required to encircle it. Okay? So, just marking it on one side doesn't qualify. Same here. Okay? Just taking it and putting something on one side is not going to qualify. It has to encircle it. So, wrap it around with tape, something around that nature, then that's going to meet the requirement, okay? So again, it encircles the conductor and must be accomplished by one of the following. You could stripping the insulation or covering from the entire exposed length, okay? So again, coming in, you could take, if it's, let's say it's black, you could strip all of the insulation off of it, coming in, so that is the bare conductor coming in, if that's being used as an equipment ground, okay. You can color the insulation or covering green at the termination, just like that other picture did. They went a little overboard, but that's all that's necessary. Or it says marking the insulation or covering with green tape or green adhesive labels at the termination. Bunch of different options here for you to be able to do that, okay. So you encircle it, but you also could simply remove the insulation, okay? All right, so I'm going to answer your questions that people have been asking, so at this point, it's going to answer all of your questions. Now, what about 250.119c? What if we have multi-conductor cables? All right, say, well, if you have one or more insulated conductors In a multi-conductor cable, which I think you would, in a multi-conductor cable, you're going to have more than one, by the way. It says, at the time of installation, are permitted to be permanently identified an equipment grounding conductor at each end and every point where the conductors are accessible by one of the following means. Okay, so this is a multi-conductor cable, allowing you to re-identify inside of a cable assembly, not size specific. Okay, not like the 4 and larger before. This is not size specific. This is specific to multi-conductor type cables. Okay, like a tray cable, that application. All right, it says, 1, you could strip the insulation from the entire exposed length, same as you did with the 4 and larger, if it was in a raceway, same here, but this is a cable. You could color the exposed insulation green. Okay, so you can color it all green. Or 3, marking the exposed insulation with green tape. That's typically what most people will do. Or adhesive or green adhesive labels, kind of the same as tape, right? And identification must encircle the insulation, okay? Must encircle it, okay? So a lot of people will just, if they're using in a cable, they will just strip off the insulation. I guard against this, and I'm going to tell you why. Is if it's in a cable assembly and you want to use one of the conductors as an equipment ground, and it's in a cable assembly, okay? It doesn't apply to 4 and larger because that's other applications. This is in a multi-conductor cable. And it is not size specific, by the way, except for the equipment ground has to be properly sized based on 251.22, whatever the overcurrent protective device is. That's a given, right? That's a given. So at the end of the day, I think that the reason I would say don't go with the method of stripping off the insulation, one is because it's not just going to slide off. You have to take it off in pieces, and you just run the risk of damaging the equipment ground. The more you try to cut stuff off, insulation off, the more you go, the more chances you could actually nick up the copper, that type of thing. So I'd much rather you just re-identify it at its termination with green tape, that type of thing. I'm just saying. Probably the best advice I can give you. Don't mess up that equipment ground. Okay. All right. And that should have answered the other questions we had. I guess, let's see. Carlos says, question, how does some inspectors allow to wrap, what? How come some inspectors allow the blank wrap? I got to post that again, Carlos. I got to allow the heat wrap around a green screw in a forces box. Another, I'm not. There's every box that's bonded has to have a specific dedicated connection to it. All right, whether it's a green screw, whether it's not necessarily required to be a green screw, it is required to be green as a main bonding jumper, a green finish. It is required to be green if it is on a device like a switch or a receptacle, that type of thing. In a box, not necessarily required to be green, although usually those screws are sized properly for an already tapped location where the equipment ground would go. But I can't explain why an AHJ would let you use any screw that wasn't specifically designated for equipment grounds. I can only say it's maybe the inspector's ignorance. They don't understand. They did it when they were an electrician, and they said, I ain't worried about it. I'll let you do it. They only increase their liability in doing so if something goes wrong. A lot of people say, what does it matter? It's metal to metal. You never want to use a mounting screw that happened to be conveniently there to also be where you make your bond connection. You don't want to do that. You want a dedicated screw or dedicated connection, whether it's those little clips that clip onto the metal boxes or whatnot. You want it to be dedicated to the equipment ground. Okay, you don't want to use any mounting screws, any mounting holes that were not designed for use with the equipment ground. Okay, you get me? All right. So here you go. So this is a good example. See right here? This one right here. So this is a green insulation from the factory right here, right? And this one says an equipment grounding conductor in a multi-conductor cable permitted to be permanently identified by stripping the insulation from entire exposed length, because this is showing you have that option. Coloring the exposed insulation green, again, a little bit more than necessary, whatever. Or coloring the exposed insulation green or marking exposed insulation with green tape, that type of thing. Okay, so you have some options there for it. Okay. All right. Check here. Let's check ourself. Let's check ourself. Suppose two electricians are discussing identification of a, you two, all of you out there are discussing this. You're discussing the identification of a 2 AWG copper equipment grounding conductor. The conductor was supplied by the manufacturer with, I don't know what that is, blue. I want to say that's blue. Yeah. Typo. Blue colored insulation. Okay. Electrician A says that the conductor cannot be used since it does not meet the wiring requirements of 200.19b, right? And the electrician B says that the conductor can be made compliant with 250.19b by marking the insulation or covering with green tape and green adhesive labels at the termination. Okay, well, the first thing we need to figure out here, okay, is that two are discussing 2 AWG copper equipment grounded conductor. Okay, the conductor was supplied by the manufacturer with blue. All right, so the first question for me, right, and it should be for you on this, between these two electricians, this is a water cooler argument between electricians, okay? I need to know what it's dealing with, okay? So you're saying, okay, well, if it's in a cable, first of all, it's 2 gauge and larger. So if it was a multi-conductor cable, it wouldn't matter, right? I absolutely can re-identify it. Then the other one says that this one says it can't be done because it doesn't meet the requirement. This guy is saying, well, it's a 2 gauge, man. It's obviously larger than a 4, and the code says I can. So which electrician is correct? Okay. What do you think? Which electrician is correct? All right. And I'm going to show you, because I like to do this to show you. Let me get back here with it. There you go. Okay. And it won't let me show you. Ah, crap. All right. All right, guys. It won't let me show you. So I'll just give you the answer. I was kind of hoping it would let me show you their commentary, but it won't. And I can't adjust it. So, okay. So who is correct here? Y'all know the answer. Now, no, they're not both correct. Okay. So if it was a cable, you'd be able to do it no matter what the size is. If it's in a raceway, and we're not talking about neutrals, we're talking about equipment grounds. If it is what? 4 and larger, what we just saw says that it can be re-identified, right? So I could take that blue and I could re-identify it at termination with green tape, and it would be perfectly okay to do that. Guys, that's just what we just read back here, right here. That's what we just read, right? All that was just the whole part we just went over. Okay, y'all do know that 2 is larger than a 4, right? Okay, good. So y'all did good, right? So the electrician B is 100% correct. Electrician A is not correct and needs to go back and understand the requirements or the allowance for re-identification, that type of thing. All right. All right, equipment grounding conductor installation. An equipment grounding conductor is required to be installed in accordance with 250.120A, B, and C. Okay, so 250.120A says raceways, cable trays, cable armor, cable bus, or cable sheath requirements. If it consists of a raceway, cable tray, cable armor, cable bus framework, or cable sheath, or if it is wire within a raceway or cable, it is required to be installed in accordance with the applicable provisions of this code, using fittings for joints and terminations approved for use with the type of raceway and cable used. All connections, joints, and fittings must be made tight using suitable tools. So this is firstly saying, look, raceways, if they qualify, 250.118, if they qualify, cable trays have to have, unless they qualify, have to have a a wire type or an equipment grounded conductor. Could be the raceway, could be the cable tray as a supporting component, okay? Could be the cable armor in some things like AC cables, okay? But MC cables, the armor cannot be used, so that will have a wire type inside of it. But basically what this is saying is if you're using these types of things as an equipment ground, then you have to make sure that you're using proper joining, proper connections, listed fittings that are listed for the application of grounding and bonding. All of that has to be met in order to be able to establish an equipment grounded conductor with those types of options, okay? All the fittings, everything. And so, by the way, if you buy EMT, you buy rigid, use couplings, they're going to be fine. You buy the AC connectors for AC cable, they're going to be evaluated for it to work with the actual sheathing, all that type of stuff. So you're going to buy listed connections, listed fittings for use with the listed wiring method. That's pretty much going to take care of itself, okay? All right. So here you go. This is some examples. All connections are tight using proper fittings, okay? All of this could be used as an equipment grounded conductor if you choose. And again, most engineers are going to say, I'm going to put a wire type in there, but this gutter right here would qualify as long as all these connections are made right. As long as you're following the rules in 250.96, right? You meet all that stuff, then you're going to be good to go. That type of scenario, right? All right, so let's talk about equipment grounded conductors when it comes to aluminum or this other type of conductive material, which I won't discuss, okay? I'm going to just talk about this, aluminum, okay? It says equipment grounded conductors of bare, covered, or insulated aluminum or that other conductor shall comply with the following, okay? Unless part of an applicable cable wiring method, bare or covered conductors shall not be installed if subject to corrosive conditions. So these aren't to be used or subject to corrosive conditions or to be installed in direct contact with concrete, masonry, or the earth. That should go without saying. So equipment grounded conductors, unless they're part of some wiring method that's already been evaluated and approved for the location to where it's going to be, right? Other than that, then what we're not going to have is aluminum or this other type of conductor installed where it is subject to corrosive conditions, or if you're going to actually install it in direct contact with concrete, masonry, or the earth. Number two, terminations made within outdoor enclosures that are listed and identified for the environment shall be permitted within 18 inches of the bottom of the enclosure. So that's saying if you're bringing in wiring methods that have an aluminum or that other type of, other than copper, aluminum or that other type of conductive material, that you can make these terminations within 18 inches of the earth as long as the enclosure that you're terminating in is rated for the environment. That'd be like a NEMA 3R and things like that. I don't speak to that material, Paul, is because they are people who drug me through a bunch of court stuff and legal stuff and threats and all that for an innocent podcast I did a couple years ago. So I am not going to give credence to them or that product or even talk about it. So I just don't talk about it, okay? I got drugged through the mud. I got told that I was in part of a conspiracy and my name was drugged through the mud for no reason, and I never even referred to that product, that company, so I'm not even going to talk about it. Okay? I'm not even giving it any justification on any of my videos or my podcasts. Okay? All right, so the next, third one says aluminum or that other conductor external to buildings or enclosures shall not be terminated within 18 inches of the earth unless terminated within a listed wire connector system. That is a system that is designed for termination in the location to where this termination is taking place. So it may be encapsulated, it may be sealed, it may be something in there, right? So that would be specific application. And I can tell you that at the end of the day, it is still very rare to see terminations for equipment grounded conductors of aluminum or that other type of material in the larger sizes, although it could happen more often than you would be with smaller branch circuits, because typically you're not going to see, even though the code doesn't prohibit somebody to make a 12 gauge or a 10 gauge aluminum circuit conductor. There's nothing in the code that says you can't. It's just most manufacturers are not going to do it because we're going to use copper for that. But at the end of the day, if you did have it and you terminated it, it can't be within 18 inches of the earth. And that termination on a bus, unless it's in an enclosure that's rated for the environment outside that you're going to be terminating, or if it's external and it just happens to be running outside, and I don't know when you would have an aluminum or that other type of conductor running external to a building, unless it's in the raceway, and then it comes to like some kind of a junction box where it terminates, well, then you have to make sure that that's not within 18 inches unless that enclosure that it's terminating in is rated and sealed and is part of a listed wire connector system, whatever that is. You can Google that type of thing. So, you with me? All right. And that covers that. And 250.120C, what about those equipment grounding conductors that are smaller than 6? Okay. Now it says equipment grounding conductors smaller than 6 if not routed with the circuit conductors as permitted in 250.130C. And that is allowance. There's a unique allowance where you might have a system that doesn't have an equipment grounding conductor in it. And then you'll get an allowance to run a single equipment grounding conductor that is not with the circuit conductors. This is very unique. This is where you have older systems. It gives you some options. You know, one of the options, you can protect a circuit that has no equipment ground with a GFCI. It's not perfect, but it works. Or you could actually run a separate equipment grounding conductor to that circuit. And so that's what 250.130C is kind of giving you some guidance on that, right? All right. So anyway, it says equipment grounding conductors smaller than 6 are required to be protected from physical damage by an identified raceway or cable armor unless installed within hollow spaces of the framing members or buildings or structures, and if not subject to physical damage. Okay, I don't think I have a picture for that. Yeah, I mean, I got a little bit of a picture of this, but I wanted to highlight this so that if you were, take your time when this show's over, I encourage you to go look at 250.130C. You probably never, ever done that type of application before, where you had an old system and you're like, look, I want to put a grounded type receptacle in there, but it's not a grounded type receptacle bar. It doesn't have that. I want to replace it. I want to put a different receptacle in there. And I don't want a GFCI. I do have some options to get there. But when I take that EGC from my panel to that box, okay, that doesn't have an EGC in it, I got to follow some rules. And then I got to protect that conductor en route to that box. And I got to use a wire method. Generally, it's going to be something, if it's subject to physical damage, again, that's subjective, then I got to protect it. You know what I'm saying? So it's probably more trouble than it's worth. So most people just put a GFCI upstream and protect it, or GFCI in the location and just let it ride. But you do have options. So go check out 250.130C. That's your homework to check that out today when the show is over. Okay. And this is an example of where they're allowed to run this. They're running this equipment grounding conductor outside of it. All right. But it's got to be protected unless somebody determines that it's not subject to equipment ground. Now, I would argue, I don't know that these are actually equipment grounding conductors, but it's just a good picture, just showing some green being run out on its own. But if somebody determines that it's subject to physical damage, then it has to be protected, okay? And again, remember, this is smaller than 6, okay? The rule in 250.130C allows you to be larger than 6, 4 and larger, then it would not have this protection requirement, okay? That type of thing. But obviously, in this case, they're illustrating these are smaller than 6, so they have to be protected. And I guess this is subject to physical damage or whatnot. I don't know. Just an illustration, folks. Okay. Sizing of the equipment grounding conductor. We're going to knock this part out today, and hopefully we'll be good enough done with this. So whether you have copper, aluminum, or this other type of conductor, equipment grounding conductors of the wire type are not permitted to be smaller. So they can't be smaller. Could they be larger? Yes. Voltage drop or an engineer could demand them being larger. But they're not to be smaller than what's permitted, what's stated in table 250.122. Right now, in 250.122, you're going to have an A, a B, a C, a D, an E. You're going to have these rules that you got to keep in mind. So you don't just get blindsided and say, oh, I'm just going to go, at all cases, I'm going to go to table 250.122. You might have parallels you have to worry about with circuits, and you need to understand the rules in 250.122F. You might have multiple circuits that are in a raceway, and you really only need one properly sized equipment ground, that type of thing. So important to know each one of these requirements. But we're just going to talk about sizing right now. All right. Now, the equipment grounding conductor is not required to be larger than the circuit conductors supplying the equipment. Now, this is important, and I'll just talk about it. In the 2023 and earlier, okay, that is not necessarily the case. If you were running one set of circuit conductors to a piece of equipment, just one set of ABC, and you had an equipment ground, okay, say it's a motor, doesn't have a neutral, so it's just ABC, and you run it, right? And you run the equipment ground. The equipment ground never needs to be larger than those circuit conductors, okay? However, I will caution you, until the verbiage comes out, until the language comes out in 2026, y'all have heard me talk about this. If I have parallel raceways, the code requires that the equipment ground be full size in each raceway, right? Okay. Well, if it's required to be full size based on what? The size of the overcurrent protected device. So you size the overcurrent and you put full EGC in every raceway. So it could be an EGC, equipment grounding conductor could be larger than the circuit conductors in a given raceway because you're paralleling it out. And so they get small, the conductors will get smaller, the hot conductors will get smaller as you have more sets, right? Because you're breaking up that current amongst multiple conductors. And so the conductors will get smaller as you have more of the sets, right? Whereas if you have fewer sets, then those conductors will be larger because it's all about breaking up the current equally amongst the sets, right? There is nothing in the 2023 or earlier that says that, okay? Because if I have parallel conductors, say I have a 4,000 amp switchgear, okay? A feeder's going out to the feeder's going to the switchgear. I have 4,000 amps. I'm going to size my equipment ground to 4,000 amps based on 250.122, and that's going to be full size in each raceway. Now, nothing says that I can parallel that like we normally parallel. And when I say that, it means taking 10 sets of ungrounded conductors to get a certain amount of current. That's why we're paralleling. Okay? We need to run more sets so we don't have to run one big conductor. We run smaller conductors to get the same amount of current. Well, we're not doing that with an equipment ground. That's not why we're paralleling. Okay? And so you run full size. Well, if that's the case, up until the 2026 gets published, the concept is that you could have an equipment grounded conductor that is larger than any of the ungrounded conductors or grounded conductors in a specific raceway. Now, when the 2026 comes out, that all is going to go out the window, and it never, ever needs to be larger than the largest ungrounded or grounded circuit conductor that's inside the specific raceway. Okay? If that's a lot to take in, it's very confusing for many people. I think they made a mistake, but I'll teach it. If it's accepted, I'll teach it. But other than that, I've got letters from NFPA, an informal interpretation. I have people from well-known educators that explain that, look, we still have to clear an overcurrent device. So engineers could specify that the equipment ground's larger than what's in 250.122. They have the right, that type of thing. They also have the right to make it smaller if they want, but they own responsibility of it once they do. Okay, so anyway, enough of that. So just remember the scenario, if it's just one raceway and you have circuit conductors in there, that equipment ground never needs to be larger than the circuit conductor, largest circuit conductor, right? Hot conductor. If you have parallels, then it's full size in each raceway, and that's how you would size it based on the size of the overcurrent protected device, okay? Now, that's an awful lot. I got to do a show just on that. All right, so if a cable tray, raceway, or cable armor or sheathing is used as an equipment grounded conductor, okay, which they can if they're listed as such, and there's a lot of raceways that are listed in 250.118, right? And there are cable assemblies like AC cable or that special MC cable, or you could use MC smooth or corrugated, or even an MI type of cable, those type of things would qualify as an equipment ground in 251.18, right? Then it must comply with 250.4A5 and 250.4B4. Okay, so the B4 is dealing with the ungrounded systems, and A5 is dealing with grounded systems. So we have to make sure we make all the connections, create a low impedance affected ground fault current path, make sure we connect everything together properly in order to facilitate the operation of an overcurrent protected device. Yada, yada, yada. We have to do all the connections properly. That's what we have to do, okay? And it's important with things like cable trays, if your cable tray is actually listed for grounding bonding, that you make sure the joints, the segments are connected properly. If they're not, you have a properly sized bonding jumper, all that kind of. With raceways, make sure you tighten your fittings tight, make sure you use listed fittings, all those type of things, okay? That's all it's reiterating, okay? All right. Next, it says the conductor's minimum size in table 250.122 assumes short duration currents corresponding to the short time current ratings of the conductor. I don't know if you know this or not, but like a bare 14 can handle thousands of amps of current quickly, momentarily, very short. Okay, so people don't understand the concepts of it, but this is a very short, quick duration within the trip curve of an overcurrent protected device. And so again, one of those things to keep in mind is we are sizing equipment grounds because we are trying to clear an overcurrent protected device, right? Under the ground fault component, okay? All right, it says short time conductor current ratings can be verified with publication P32382. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that document, had access to that document. We see this stuff all the time. It's in our grounding and bonding course. You'll have a cutaway of it. So if you have our grounding and bonding course, you'll see this figure, this graphic that depicts it. But this is the ICEA that drive that. For you guys, you really don't need to worry about that as long as you follow 250.122. And if it's a manufacturer, keep in mind that if you buy an MC cable, for example, or a tray cable, okay, any type of cable assembly, the equipment grounding conductor is sized for that specific cable. Now, can you parallel multiple cables, like we said before, just like with raceways, to get more current out of those ungrounded conductors? Absolutely you can. But remember, that equipment ground that's in that individual cable was not designed for parallel applications. So it may be too small, okay? So you have to be aware of that, right? If you oversize your cables or you oversize your ungrounded conductors for, let's say, voltage drop, which isn't a requirement except for in fire alarm systems and the sensitive electronic equipment, things like that, or whatever, those type of things. When you're doing that, right? So if you're increasing the size, right, for this application, then what happens is that you might have to increase, you're going to have to increase the size of the equipment ground proportionally. And that means that your existing cable assembly probably is not going to have an equipment ground that's properly sized. So you have to get specially made MC cable or specially made tray cable with an oversized equipment ground, right? But rest assured, there are some allowances in the NEC and 251.22F, F2 specifically, that will allow you to be able to, for example, run MC cable or tray cable and use the existing equipment ground, even though it's too small, but you have to run a full-size equipment grounding conductor with those cables, and then you connect all of the equipment grounds that are in each one of the cables together at each end. A bus is fine, connect them to the bus. And then that single properly sized equipment ground, you connect to the same bus. So they all act as one. So you do have some allowances that you can use if you want to use an off-the-shelf type of tray cable or MC cable or something like that in a cable tray, but you have to follow those rules to do that, okay? All right, just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, so let's get on. It says if the table 250.122 size is beyond thermal damage curves in this document, increasing the equipment grounding conductor size or replacing the overcurrent protective device with one which works faster can be a scheme that your engineer may try to accomplish. This is on the engineer. This is not something that you as an electrician need to tackle. You don't need to get this document from ICEA. Don't need to try to do any of that. Follow the NEC. My concern is that the code panel 5 did not, when they brought up in the middle of the night the change to this rule about equipment ground conductors, that they even opened up this document and looked at it. That was my concern. I don't think they looked at this at all. Okay, but it is. That ship has sailed, and that's what's coming for the 2026. So, is what it is. Okay. Oh, here's that curve. Here's that sheet right here. So you've got your conductor sizing over here, right? And this is your short circuit current over here, depending on the rating. And this shows you the cycles for clearing, okay, based on the short circuit current, thousands of amperes, right? This is in thousands of amperes, okay? And this is basically comes out of that document, and it shows you the curve right here. You should not be doing anything to do with this formula, okay? So this is an example right here where you have a, let's see here, a 4,300 amp cycle right here. And here it's talking about, let's see, this is a 40 right here. This curve right here. So it starts, this comes to the circle right here. If you have a one cycle clearance of 0.0167, then right here, this would be a 1-aught has a clearing of 40,000 amperes at one cycle right here. So that just happens to be right there, that 1-aught right there, okay, can handle 40,000 amperes for one cycle, okay? So that's what your clearing time is on your overcurrent device, and you're going to protect that conductor. And as you see, as you get smaller and you come over, depending on the short circuit current level, what you're dealing with, okay, you will see all different. So anyway, you shouldn't be messing with this table. This should be something you don't even mess with, okay? Let your engineer do that. Okay, now, let's check ourselves real quick here. And oh, and by the way, 250.122 again is based on the size of the overcurrent protective device. Okay, so I remember I told you there's 3 tables when it comes to if your exam prep that you want to commit to memory. 250.66 deals with the size of the equipment grounded conductor based on the size of the overcurrent protected device. Okay. You've got 250.102, which is if you get a question that's asking you about sizing the minimum size for the grounded conductor, which you're going to get there by 250.24 anyway. It's going to send you there. It's supply side bonding jumpers. You'll go there for the rules. The system bonding jumper, you'll go there for the rules. That's because the 250.102C is based on the size of conductors, whereas 250.66 is based on size of the overcurrent protected device. And of course, you have 250.66, which is sizing the equipment, the grounding electrode conductor, and that's also based on the size of conductors that are supplying the system. So again, the only one that uses the device is 250.122. Everything else is using conductors. So whatever helps you maybe memorize that stuff, or keep that in mind. Those are the most important tables to think about. What's up, Angel? Good morning. Glad to have you here. Tino says, if you say that 3 times, the candy man. I ain't saying it. I don't need the candy man. Okay. Although I'm ready to testify. Any day of the week, they want to put me on the stand. I'm ready to go. I'd love to put it out in public, my opinions. That's probably the reason why I haven't been deposed or anything like that, because I'm more than happy to give my opinions of anything. All right. Suppose the rating of the overcurrent device in the circuit ahead of the piece of equipment is 1,000 amps. Okay. Assume that the maximum conductor operating in short circuit temperature is 75 degrees C and 150 degrees C respectively. Okay, it says, what is the minimum AWG size copper conductor permitted in table 250.122? Okay, all right, so let's go real quickly. If I was doing this, let's go real quickly to the NEC. And I have noticed that EV Mux must have fixed something that's working a little bit better than it has been. I haven't, the screens are working fine, so that's good. All right, so let's go real quick over here. So let's answer the first question if we can. Right there. Come on. All right, there we go. All right, so let's go here. And again, we've got all these different requirements down here, which we will go over. Okay. At some point, we'll go over. And there's your paralleling requirements, right? Remember I told you F, okay, down here. Multi-conductor cables right here. That's if you're paralleling multi-conductor cables, like we just talked about. In a cable tray, for example, is one of the ways. And this is the one you have to be more, pay attention to. This one right here. Okay. Anyway, that's what we're talking about. All right, so let's go to the table. So here's the table. Let me pop this up. So this was a 1,000 amp overcurrent protected device right here. Right there. So this in copper, it says a 2-aught, right? Because we're doing copper. Okay, and this is the minimum size equipment ground, minimum size. Okay, so we have 1,000 amp overcurrent device, 2-aught copper. Okay, so that would be, you say, okay, 2-aught copper. Let's go back to the lesson now. It says if the overcurrent device responds in 2 cycles, how much current can the insulated copper conductor from A withstand? Okay, all right, so there we go. Thinking about this, so we got to go back to this type of thing, look at, although I tell you don't mess with this, okay? I tell you don't do this, but I'll go back. So 2 cycles is right here, okay? So we've got 2 cycles, and this was let's see here, A. So we said this was a 2-aught, so we're going to go down here to a 2-aught right here, follow this thing over, boop, 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 boom, right here. This is the 2 cycle. Right here, and it looks like it's right about in the middle. So we'll say about 35,000 at 2 cycles. It can handle about 35,000 at 2 cycles. Okay, let's go to the next question. Now, if the overcurrent device responds at 100 cycles, how much current can the insulated conductor handle? So if it's at 100 cycles, okay, well, it's still a 2-aught, right here, and I know this is hard to see, guys. Is that a little better? All right, so here's your 2-aught. So let's go to 100 cycles, which is not good, by the way. All right. Right here. And this is 100 cycles right here. And we'll go this. So this here, and this can handle, let's go up here. It handle about, let's see, about right here. And it looks like it can handle probably about between 5,000 and 6,000 amps. That's dramatically different than it would be when we saw it at 1 cycle or 2 cycle, which is over in the 30,000 and up, right? That type of thing. So that's how much that conductor can handle, right? And you can see that a lot has to do with the clearing time. Quicker the clearing, the more it can handle because it's a very short duration. See what I'm saying? All right, so let's go back to the lesson. I got to bring this back down. You won't be able to see squat, okay? All right, so that's where we got this. And so let's see. Okay, now, what about increasing in size? And it looks like we're going to go one more day. It looks like I'm going to go one more day. I'm not going to go into these because we're going to go into each one of these individually to finish this out. So it looks like we're going to do one more day of sizing. And we're going to get into these rules about increasing the sizing. I'm going to show you how you do it, how you do the math, how you increase the size of the equipment grounded conductor proportionally, okay, to the increase in size of the ungrounded conductors. So if you've ever wondered how to do all that, we're going to do that tomorrow. So let's go over to do some giveaways. All right, so let's do some giveaways and spin the wheel. Let me see if I've got my list here. I do. Let's do this. Emails coming out this week. We're waiting on them 1 or 2. And I would tell you who they were, but I don't have them. And Jeff's not here today, or not on today. He's not connected with me today. So that's Fast Tracks 2, Jonathan, if you already have that, we can spin it again for you if you want, or we can extend you out another year or a year from wherever you're at. Totally up to you. Would you be the one for that? Anyway, don't go looking for that ICEA. You got paid for it. All right. You're registered to get Trade Hog. Val, we'll hope good luck to you. Hopefully you win that. Okay. Okay, Jonathan, just send me an email to remind me, and I will make sure we get it done for you, Jonathan. We got so much good things coming up on the tube. That's the best value to extend it, because that's where we're moving all the education stuff, the video parts that we're going to be recording. That's where we're going to be putting it. So the best place to be. David, Ron. All right, David, you got an NFC promotion, and by the way, if you haven't seen those cards, this is what they look like, and they got the NFC built into them. They work amazing, so you help promote us. You can also reprogram this if you win this to be your own business or your own link tree or whatever you want it to be. It's free to do. Okay, very simple app. These are heavy duty cards, but it helps us promote coffee hour. Share it with your friends, or you can leave what we program on it and share it at the job site. Share it with all the electricians you know. We appreciate it, but that's what that is. But you can reprogram it if you want. Not a big deal. We don't care. All right, let's go again. You're in the drawing for that. Exclusive, only a few of those NFC cards that we're getting rid of for that. Otherwise, we're going to keep most of them for our own trade promotions. Yeah, the more you win, the more chance. Sciotti, is that right? Did I say it right? You get in the drawing for Trade Hog. So congratulations for that. Look for that. You get you in the drawing for that. And I kept y'all a little over today. I apologize. Equipment grounding conductors is a deep topic, especially now. Tomorrow we're going to get into the different types and different rules for it. Michael Yarborough, and you won a registered for the VD card. Okay, congratulations. That looks like this right here, and again, it's also heavy duty. That's what the VD cards look like. Okay, there you go. Also, guys, I don't know if we're doing this fully yet, but Jeff brought up an idea. We need to come up with a complete pack of cards like this that have all the most important formulas. We're going to have a quick card for non-metallic sheath cable. We're going to have a quick card for MC cable, specific code rules that you can pull it right out and look at if you're doing an installation. Like, oh crap, what's that requirement? Boom, right there. So we're going to have the most common requirements on there, and we're going to have it in a pack. So it's going to be kind of like our minimalist wallet packs, but it's going to be the packs, and we're going to put info cards in there. So they'll be coming out with these cards, and there'll also be a new card coming out typically every month that will go in there. That type of thing that you can get if you want it. You may not want all of them, but we're coming out with a detailed collection of these heavy duty cards, not those cheap little things, heavy duty. And the cards are going to be designed to have one for NM, one for MC, one for AC, one for tray cable, one for the code rules, one for formulas, one for voltage drop, and basically they'll be in this little pocket thing that you can have in your pocket. And when you say, oh crap, what's the rule for, what's the bending requirements, or what are the make a saddle bend or whatever, you can pop the little card out and look at it. And it's not those little cheap flimsies. It's these heavy duties, okay? And they're engraved on a laser engraved. That's coming out. And Jeff thought that would be a great idea because it would have all of them fit nicely into it. And you can have a nice little collection of all these key things like key formulas and key code references and all this kind of stuff, that type of thing. Okay, that was his idea, and I was like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea for that. And the minimalist wallets seem perfect for that because they'll hold all of them and protect them while they're in your pocket, that type of thing. Okay, and they got the clip on the back, so you can actually click it onto your tool bin or your tool pouch or whatever. Use the little clip like the money clip, but instead clip it on there, so you have all of those quick guides right there at your fingertips. Sounds like an awesome idea, right? Okay. Yeah, we're going to have one that's got the equipment grounding conductor table on it, common tables, all that kind of stuff is what he's talking about, creating a complete library of these things, because we're known for our engravings being extremely crisp quality. So I don't know if you can see that, that type of thing. We use only fiber lasers for what we do here. We do have a CO2, but we don't use the CO2. We use the fiber for everything on metal. That type of thing. And we will give away those packages, which are going to be awesome. That type of thing. Anyway, sorry about that. All right, but they're not ready yet. We're still doing the groundwork for that, or determining what tables. If you want to get involved in that and want to help out, go to paulabernathy.com and let us know what you would like to see on a quick reference card. All right, we'll be more than happy to look into it for you. All right. Okay, and if we use your recommendation on a card, okay, then maybe we'll put you in a drawing, that type of thing. All right, so let's go. Let's give another one away. Unless you say, I recommend you do a voltage drop card. We already have that. I hope you do an ampacity card. No duh. Be creative. You know what I'm saying? We're already going to have all those cards for those normal stuff. All right, Cray, what do you got? Oh, you're in for one of those NFC promotionals. They're going to be neat. Great for your business, or great to use on your own, or great to help promote us, however you want to do it. All right, let's see here. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to let you folks go. Sorry to keep you longer than normal. I appreciate you. Remember, if you have any questions you want us to talk about on the show, or you want us to do a podcast on, do me a favor, go to paulabernathy.com, paulabernathy.com. New place. You are in the drawing for the knife, and those nifty little knives, by the way. And if you happen to get the big ones by then we'll give you a choice, but this is what they look like, by the way. Okay, look at that. It's got engraving on the actual knife part as well. It says electrician on it. And they're not lockable, so be careful. But they're great for opening up boxes quickly, panel load centers, all this kind of stuff. Just nifty to have. I have one on my keychain. I use it almost daily. Okay, so that's what those are. We found a few more of those, so you are back in the drawing for that. All right, folks, that is it. Glad to have you here this morning. Have a safe week. We'll catch you tomorrow, where we'll maybe wrap up Equipment Grounds. Maybe I can wrap it up in one day if I get started quick enough. It's hard for me to do. But anyway, I appreciate you all. Until next time, folks, stay safe. God bless. Have a great week. And we'll catch you tomorrow on Coffee Hour. Peace. Oh, by the way, today's show is sponsored by TradeHog.net. TradeHog.net. Check it out. Test the hog. See what answers it gives you. I think you'll be surprised. Peace out.